Welcome to this explainer. Right off the bat, I want to let you know you are in a safe space here. Today, we're taking a really calm, deeply validating look into something that carries so much silent shame for so many people. We're going to dive into the mechanics of trauma bonding. If you're here because you're trying to figure out your own heart and mind, I just want you to take a deep breath. You are absolutely not alone, and science actually has a profound explanation for exactly what you're going through. You know it isn't healthy. You've probably known for a long time, right? You can list the red flags. You've had that conversation with yourself, clearly, rationally, with absolute certainty that this relationship is hurting you. And then, they reach out. Or maybe you just remember a tiny moment of tenderness, or the silence just gets way too unbearable. And you go back. And the shame of going back, well, on top of everything else, that becomes its own agonizing wound. People who love you just don't understand it. They tell you, hey, just leave. They ask why you keep returning to something that damages you. And the honest answer, the one you can barely even admit to yourself, is that you don't fully know. But psychology knows, listen to me on this, what you are experiencing is not a failure of self-respect. It's not a weakness. It's absolutely not evidence of some deep flaw in your character. Your inability to leave is actually a powerful neurological override. It operates through mechanisms so deeply rooted in human biology that they can completely bypass your conscious decision-making, even in the most intelligent, self-aware people. Okay, let's dive into this. The term trauma bond was first coined by psychologist Patrick Carnes back in the 1990s. He observed a really consistent pattern in survivors of abusive relationships. It's this powerful, entirely involuntary emotional attachment to the very person causing them harm. It's so important to understand that this is a neurologically distinct state. This isn't just ordinary love that's complicated by conflict. This bond is forged not despite the abuse, but in some very real biological ways because of it. The actual engine driving this bond is something called intermittent reinforcement. Way back in the 1950s, researcher B.F. Skinner demonstrated that unpredictable reward schedules create far stronger behavioral conditioning than consistent ones. It's literally the exact same psychological principle that makes slot machines the most fiercely addictive form of gambling ever created. In a toxic relationship, the abuse, the coldness, the criticism, and the withdrawal, they're interspersed with highly unpredictable moments of incredible warmth and tenderness. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. See, in ordinary love, consistency creates safety. But with intermittent reinforcement, your brain doesn't register the coldness mixed with sudden tenderness as abuse. Instead, your brain registers it as a powerful reward system. You don't just want the warmth, you actually become addicted to the cycle of anticipating it. The neurological profile of trauma bonding shows activation patterns that are incredibly similar to substance addiction. The craving is real, and the withdrawal, it's very real. Section 1. The 7 stages of building the bond. Trauma bonds do not happen overnight. They are built systematically, piece by piece. Understanding the descent into this dynamic is really how you begin to see clearly what has been built inside you. The trap is set in 4 initial stages. Stage 1 is love bombing. The relationship starts with this intense attention and affection that feels completely unlike anything else. Your nervous system registers this as profound safety. Then we hit stage 2. Trust and dependency, where you literally begin to organize your sense of safety around their approval. Then that confusing shift happens. Stage 3 is criticism. Small, subtle, totally deniable moments of coldness that directly contrast that initial love bombing. And stage 4 is gaslighting, where your very perception of reality is actively undermined. You're told you're being too sensitive or, that you're just imagining things. And here is where things become truly, deeply entrenched. Stage 5 is resignation. You just stop raising issues. You adapt, and you shrink yourself down to avoid conflict. Stage 6 is the loss of self. The version of you that existed before this relationship becomes incredibly difficult to access, mostly because your entire identity is now organized around managing theirs. And finally, stage 7, the addiction itself. At this point, your nervous system is fully calibrated to this specific person's cycle. Leaving feels neurologically indistinguishable from chemical withdrawal. Which brings us to a question that outsiders just cannot seem to wrap their heads around. Why does leaving feel worse than staying? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely reframes your struggle biologically. The answer is neurological. The oldest part of your nervous system has encoded this abusive person as a primary attachment figure. Your nervous system's top priority isn't actually your well-being. Its priority is attachment, belonging, survival.
It's the exact same system that bonds a vulnerable child to a caregiver, even an unreliable one, because to the primitive brain, being alone literally means death.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding this contrast. When you leave or when they withdraw, you don't just feel emotional pain. You feel a literal biological survival threat. Absolute panic. A pull so strong it feels like gravity. And because that panic is so overwhelming, going back feels like relief. It feels like desperately needed oxygen after suffocation. And your brain, well, it files that relief away as further evidence that this person is completely necessary for your survival.
Section 2. The childhood connection and the original template. To really understand all of this, we have to look back. We need to gently explore why some nervous systems are simply more susceptible to this specific painful dynamic than others. Research consistently shows us that for many people, a trauma bond in adulthood is not their first encounter with this dynamic. Adults who experienced inconsistent caregiving in childhood, where love was unpredictable, conditional, or maybe alternated with emotional unavailability, they are significantly more likely to develop trauma bonds later on. You learned very early on that you had to earn warmth rather than just safely receive it. Familiar, even when it is painful, registers to the nervous system as safe. I really want you to take that in. When you encounter an adult relationship that recreates those childhood conditions of having to earn love, the pattern doesn't feel dangerous to your conditioned nervous system. Actually, it just feels like home.
Section 3. Breaking the bond and escaping the prison. Listen, this is not your destiny. Understanding the mechanics of your neural prison is the very first step to breaking right out of it. Let's look at the research-backed, practical steps to address the physiological conditions that are maintaining this bond.
Breaking a trauma bond isn't just about making a decision. It's an action plan. First, strict no contact. Any contact maintains the bond and reactivates that neurochemical cycle. Reducing contact is a neurological necessity to stop the cycle cold. Second, you have to accept the withdrawal. It's going to be agonizing, I won't lie, but it is temporary. That pain is just proof the bond was real, and it's exactly what addiction withdrawal feels like. Third, you must actively build new sources of regulation. That means safe environments and practices that prove to your body that belonging doesn't require pain. And fourth, work with a trauma-informed therapist. You do not have to do this alone. This is complex biology we're dealing with, and having expert support is absolutely essential. As we close this explainer, I really want to lift this burden of shame directly off your shoulders. You are not weak for loving someone who hurt you. You are not foolish for going back. Those past attempts to return, they were biological imperatives, not personal failures. You are not broken for finding it almost impossible to leave. Your character and your profound worth are entirely decoupled from the neurological trap you found yourself caught in. Your nervous system built the most powerful bond it knew how to build in the only direction available to it. That is the core truth of the trauma bond. Your oldest biological systems were just doing exactly what they were designed to do, but in conditions they were never designed for. With self-compassion and with the right support around you, you can absolutely begin to build something different. So, I have to ask, did any of this finally explain something you've been struggling to understand about yourself? Please, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your experience can be such a profound step in breaking the isolation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, your healing is worth protecting.